Sometimes the shortest trip changes your life forever, and the scariest part is realizing it was never an accident. That thought kept replaying in my head as the bus rolled into Havenridge beneath a sky painted with pale gray clouds. I had told myself this was nothing more than a weekend visit, a chance to reconnect with Noah after 5 years of missed calls, unanswered messages, and promises that life had simply gotten too busy. He had finally reached out 3 nights earlier with a message so brief it felt strange coming from someone who used to talk for hours. I could really use a friend right now. That was all it said, yet it was enough to make me pack a duffel bag, request 2 days off from work, and spend nearly 6 hours crossing state lines. The small town looked exactly like the kind of place people escaped to when they wanted the rest of the world to forget they existed. Quiet streets stretched between old maple trees, coffee shops closed earlier than they should, and every porch seemed to hold an empty rocking chair facing the road. Normally I would have found it peaceful, but something about the silence felt deliberate, almost rehearsed. As I stepped onto the cracked sidewalk outside the station, a cool breeze carried the scent of pine, rain, and something else I couldn't quite identify. It lingered just long enough to make the back of my neck tighten before disappearing again. I brushed the feeling aside and checked my phone. Noah had texted me an address outside town with a single instruction: "Come alone." I laughed under my breath, convincing myself he was trying to be mysterious, just like he had back in college when he planned surprise birthday parties that everyone figured out within minutes. A local driver agreed to take me the remaining 12 miles without saying much beyond asking if I was absolutely sure about the destination. When I answered yes, he glanced at me through the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't quite read before turning onto a winding private road lined with towering evergreens. Cell service vanished almost immediately. The deeper we drove, the quieter everything became until the tires rolling across damp pavement sounded unusually loud inside the car. Finally, iron gates appeared ahead, already standing open as if someone had been expecting me. Beyond them sat an enormous estate surrounded by forests that seemed to stretch forever. Noah was waiting near the front steps, but instead of smiling and waving the way I imagined he would, he looked over both shoulders before walking toward me. His hug lasted only a second. "I'm really glad you came," he whispered, forcing a smile that never reached his eyes. Before I could ask what was wrong, he took my bag and hurried me inside. The front door closed with a heavy click behind us, echoing through the entrance hall. I turned instinctively toward the sound, suddenly aware that every window facing the driveway had thick curtains drawn shut despite the afternoon light outside. "Noah," I asked carefully, "what's going on?" He opened his mouth as if ready to answer, but instead his expression changed. His attention shifted past me toward the staircase, and all the color drained from his face. I slowly turned around, following his gaze, and found a tall man standing perfectly still at the top of the stairs, watching me as though my arrival had confirmed something he had known all along. The man at the top of the staircase did not move for several long seconds. He simply watched me with a calm expression that somehow made the enormous entrance hall feel even quieter. He looked to be in his early 30s, dressed in a charcoal suit without a single wrinkle, his dark hair neatly combed back, his posture impossibly straight. There was nothing outwardly threatening about him, yet his presence filled every corner of the room with a quiet authority that made it difficult to look anywhere else. His steel-gray eyes settled on mine for only a moment before shifting toward Noah. "Your guest has arrived," he said in a smooth, measured voice. "Earlier than expected." Noah forced another uneasy smile. "Ethan, this is Adrian Blackwood." The name sounded familiar, but I could not remember where I had heard it before. Adrian inclined his head politely. "Welcome to Blackwood Estate." His tone was courteous, but distant, as though he were greeting a business visitor rather than a friend of someone living under his roof. Before I could introduce myself, he added, "I hope your trip was comfortable." "It was," I answered. "Thank you." A brief silence followed. Adrian studied me with the same unreadable expression before turning away. "Dinner will be served at 7. Please make yourself comfortable." Without another word, he disappeared down the hallway above us, his footsteps fading almost instantly. The moment he was gone, Noah let out a slow breath he seemed to have been holding for several minutes. "Come on," he said quickly. "I will show you your room." We climbed the wide staircase in silence. The estate was far larger than anything I had imagined. Every hallway was lined with framed paintings, polished hardwood floors, and tall windows overlooking endless forests, yet there was an unusual emptiness to the place. I did not hear televisions, conversations, or even distant music. Only the faint ticking of antique clocks echoed through the halls. "You live here?" I finally asked. Noah nodded. "For now." "Working for the family?" Another pause. "Something like that." His answers felt carefully measured, each one stopping just short of revealing anything meaningful. My room overlooked a stone garden surrounded by towering pine trees. It was beautiful, almost impossibly peaceful, but something caught my attention immediately. Small security cameras were positioned beneath nearly every roofline outside. Some faced the driveway. Others watched the garden paths. One pointed directly toward my bedroom window. "That is, a lot of security," I commented. Noah glanced outside before pulling the curtains closed. "The Blackwoods value privacy." His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Just do not wander around after dark." "Why?" He hesitated. "It is simply easier if you stay inside." Before I could ask another question, someone knocked softly on the door. A housekeeper entered carrying fresh towels and tea. She smiled politely but avoided making eye contact with either of us. As she arranged everything with quiet precision, I noticed she seemed unusually tense whenever footsteps echoed somewhere else in the house. The instant she finished, she excused herself and left without saying another word. Noah checked the hallway before closing the door again. "Get some rest," he said. "Dinner is in a couple of hours." "Noah." He stopped. "You asked me to come because you needed a friend. What happened?" For the first time since I arrived, he looked directly into my eyes. His expression softened with something that resembled regret. "I will explain everything," he promised. "Just not yet." He walked away before I could respond. As evening settled over the estate, I unpacked my bag and tried reading for a while, but I could not focus. The silence outside had become almost unnatural. Then, just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, I heard slow footsteps outside my window. Curious, I pulled the curtain aside. No one was there. Yet on the stone path below, someone had left a single black umbrella standing upright in the middle of the garden, perfectly dry despite the light rain that had just begun to fall. I stood there for nearly a full minute, staring at the lonely black umbrella below. The rain continued to fall in soft, steady sheets, darkening the stone path around it, yet the fabric remained perfectly dry as though the weather itself had agreed not to touch it. A strange feeling settled over me, one I could not explain with reason alone. It was not fear exactly. It was the unmistakable sense that someone wanted me to notice it. I stepped away from the window and checked the hallway. The estate was silent. No footsteps. No conversations. Only the faint ticking of another antique clock somewhere beyond the corridor. Curiosity finally won. I slipped out of my room and quietly made my way downstairs. The polished floors reflected the warm glow of wall sconces, but the house felt strangely empty despite its enormous size. Passing through the entrance hall, I found a side door that opened onto the garden. Cool evening air greeted me along with the scent of fresh rain and pine. The umbrella stood exactly where I had seen it from above. As I approached, I realized there were no footprints leading toward it. The wet stones surrounding it were completely undisturbed. I reached out carefully, but before my fingers touched the handle, a calm voice interrupted me. "I would leave that where it is." I turned immediately. Adrian Blackwood stood several feet away beneath the covered terrace, one hand resting lightly inside his coat pocket. He had appeared so quietly that I had not heard him approach. "I was only curious," I admitted. Adrian nodded once. "Curiosity is natural. Acting on it is not always wise." He walked toward me with measured steps before stopping beside the umbrella. Without touching it himself, he glanced briefly at the sky and then back at me. "You should not be outside after sunset." "Your friend said the same thing," I replied. "Nobody has explained why." His expression remained unreadable. Not every answer helps the person asking the question. I studied him for a moment. There was something unusual about the way he carried himself. Every movement seemed deliberate, every word carefully chosen. He never appeared rushed or uncertain. Even the silence around him felt intentional. "Do you always speak in riddles?" I asked with a small smile. To my surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted ever so slightly. "Only when plain answers would create more confusion." Before I could respond, one of the estate employees hurried across the garden carrying a stack of folders. The young man slowed the instant he noticed Adrian, lowering his head respectfully before continuing without saying a word. Adrian acknowledged him with nothing more than a brief nod. The exchange lasted only seconds, yet it revealed something impossible to ignore. Every person in this estate adjusted their behavior the moment Adrian entered a room. It was not simple respect. It was something deeper, quieter, almost instinctive. We began walking back toward the house together. "Noah has changed," I said carefully. Adrian looked ahead instead of at me. "People change when they carry responsibilities they never expected." "Is he in trouble?" Another pause followed. "Noah is exactly where he believes he needs to be." His answer raised even more questions. As we reached the entrance, Adrian stopped beside the doorway. "You should stay close to the main house tomorrow." "Why tomorrow?" For the first time since we met, his eyes locked fully onto mine. There was no hostility in them, only calm certainty. "Because tomorrow," he said quietly, "someone who has been searching for this place will finally realize you are here." Before I could ask what he meant, headlights swept across the front gates in the distance. A black SUV rolled slowly through the entrance, and every light inside the estate came on at once. The arrival of the black sport utility vehicle transformed the quiet estate without a single raised voice. Staff members appeared from hallways that had seemed empty only moments before, moving with calm efficiency as though they had rehearsed the same routine countless times. Noah glanced toward the front entrance, and quietly excused himself before I could stop him. Left standing beside Adrian, I watched two well-dressed visitors step out of the vehicle carrying slim leather cases instead of luggage. Whatever business had brought them here clearly mattered. Adrian remained perfectly composed. "Dinner will be delayed," he said. "Please return to your room for a little while." I wanted to protest, but something in his steady tone convinced me it would accomplish nothing. As I walked back upstairs, I noticed another detail that had escaped my attention earlier. Nearly every hallway contained fresh flowers arranged in identical crystal vases. White lilies. The same flower repeated again and again throughout the estate. It was beautiful, yet strangely deliberate, as though every object inside the house had been placed according to invisible rules. Halfway to my room, I realized I had left my phone charging in the library downstairs. Hoping to retrieve it quickly without disturbing anyone, I took a different corridor that curved toward the western wing of the estate. The farther I walked, the quieter everything became. Most of the lights were dimmed, and the thick carpet softened every footstep until the entire hallway felt wrapped in silence. As I rounded one corner, I heard familiar voices drifting through a partially open study door. Noah was inside. Instinct told me to keep walking, but another part of me stopped. "He still does not know," Noah said quietly. Adrian answered after a brief pause. "He was never supposed to know." My heartbeat quickened. "If he finds the file before tomorrow," Noah continued, "he will ask questions none of us are prepared to answer." Adrian's reply remained calm. "The decision was made years ago. We stay with the plan." I stepped back instinctively, meaning to leave before they noticed me, but my shoulder brushed against a small side table. A silver letter opener rolled across the polished surface before settling with a faint metallic sound. The conversation inside stopped immediately. I held my breath. A moment later the study door opened. Adrian stood there looking directly at me. His expression revealed neither surprise nor irritation. "You seem to have lost your way," he observed. I swallowed awkwardly. "I was looking for my phone." He studied me for another long second before stepping aside. "Then perhaps you should retrieve it." His unexpected response caught me completely off guard. As I walked away, I could feel Noah watching me from inside the room, but neither of them tried to stop me. Back in the library, my phone rested exactly where I had left it beside a collection of old books. As I reached for it, something else caught my eye. One thick leather journal had been placed upside down on the table. A folded sheet of paper protruded slightly from between its pages. Curiosity overcame caution. I carefully pulled the paper free. It was not a letter but a detailed map of the estate and the surrounding forest. Several locations had been marked with neat black circles. One location carried a handwritten note in dark blue ink. "Guest house." Another circle surrounded the main residence. Next to it someone had written, "Observation complete." My eyes moved to the final marking near the northern tree line. Unlike the others, this one contained only 2 words written in careful block letters. "Ethan arrives." I slipped the folded map back into the journal the instant I heard footsteps approaching the library. My pulse refused to slow as I picked up my phone and turned toward the shelves, pretending to study the titles lined across the polished wood. A moment later an older gentleman wearing a dark suit entered the room carrying a tray with a porcelain teapot. He paused when he noticed me, offering a courteous smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Mr. Brooks, dinner will begin shortly." His voice was calm and professional. "Mr. Blackwood has asked that I escort you to the dining room." I nodded, forcing myself to appear relaxed. "Thank you." As we walked through the estate, I replayed the words I had just seen on the map. "Observation complete. Ethan arrives." They were too specific to be a coincidence. Someone had expected me long before Noah sent that message asking for help. The realization settled heavily in my mind. I had not simply accepted an invitation. I had stepped into a plan that had already been unfolding. The dining room was elegant but surprisingly quiet. A long oak table stood beneath an antique chandelier, though only 3 places had been set. Noah was already seated, absent-mindedly turning a glass of sparkling water between his fingers. Adrian entered a few moments later, greeting both of us with the same composed expression I had come to expect. Dinner itself was simple and thoughtfully prepared. Conversation, however, remained carefully limited. Noah spoke about the weather, local hiking trails, and the nearby lake, avoiding every subject that mattered. Adrian listened more than he spoke, occasionally asking polite questions about my work and life back home. Everything felt normal on the surface, yet beneath each exchange I sensed invisible walls preventing anyone from saying what they truly meant. Halfway through the meal, every light in the room flickered once before returning to normal. No one reacted except Adrian, who glanced briefly toward one of the security monitors mounted discreetly beside the doorway. "Excuse me," he said quietly before leaving the room. Noah watched him disappear before leaning toward me. "You should leave tomorrow morning." I stared at him in surprise. "Yesterday you said you needed me here." He lowered his voice even further. "I did. But things have changed." "Then tell me what is happening." Noah rubbed his forehead with visible frustration. "I cannot explain everything yet. Just trust me this one time." Before I could respond, Adrian returned. His expression remained controlled, but there was unmistakable urgency beneath his calm exterior. "The north access road is temporarily closed," he announced. "A vehicle stopped near the property line after sunset." Noah looked up immediately. "Visitors?" Adrian shook his head. "No identification. They left before our staff reached the gate." Silence settled over the table once again. Although no one said it aloud, I knew they were thinking about the same thing. Someone else knew exactly where this estate was. Later that evening I stood outside my bedroom window watching mist drift between the pine trees. The garden below was empty, and the mysterious umbrella had disappeared without a trace. As I closed the curtains, my phone vibrated unexpectedly. There was no caller identification, only a single text message from an unknown number. It contained one sentence and nothing more. Do not believe the first person who tells you the truth, because they have already hidden the most important part. I read the anonymous message 3 more times before the screen went dark. When I tried calling the number, I received nothing but an automated recording saying the line could not be reached. A second later, the message vanished from my phone without warning, leaving no conversation history behind. I stood frozen beside the window, wondering whether I had imagined it, but the uneasy feeling lingering in my chest told me otherwise. Someone knew I was inside Blackwood Estate, someone had my personal phone number, and someone wanted me to question everything I had seen. Sleep never came easily that night. Just before sunrise, I gave up trying and stepped into the hallway. The house was unusually active for such an early hour. Staff members moved quietly between rooms carrying folders, sealed boxes, and trays of breakfast. Their expressions remained calm, yet every movement felt slightly faster than the day before. It was as though the entire estate had shifted into preparation mode. Hoping to clear my thoughts, I walked toward the eastern veranda overlooking the forest. The morning air was cool, and a thin layer of mist floated above the trees. Adrian was already there, standing alone with a cup of black coffee in his hand. He looked as though he had been awake for hours. Without turning around, he spoke first. "You did not sleep well." I smiled faintly. "Is it that obvious? People who sleep peacefully do not come outside before sunrise." He finally looked at me, studying my face with quiet attention. "Something happened." I hesitated before deciding there was little point in hiding it. "I received a message from an unknown number last night. It disappeared before I could save it." Adrian did not appear surprised. Instead, he nodded almost imperceptibly. "What did it say?" I repeated the sentence exactly as I remembered it. His expression remained calm, but for the first time I noticed genuine concern in his eyes. "Then they have started sooner than I expected. Who are they?" I asked. Adrian remained silent for several long seconds before setting his coffee aside. "There are people who have spent years searching for someone connected to an old decision. They believe that person can answer questions they have never been able to resolve." I frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" He held my gaze steadily. "Everything." The single word landed with surprising weight. Before I could interrupt, Adrian continued. "When you arrived, I hoped I was mistaken. I hoped your presence here was only coincidence. Yesterday confirmed that it was not." My heartbeat quickened. "Confirmed what?" Adrian reached into his coat pocket and removed a small silver locket no larger than a $50. The design engraved on its surface looked strangely familiar. He handed it to me without another word. I opened it carefully. Inside was a faded photograph of a smiling couple standing beside a young child who could not have been older than 4. It took only an instant for recognition to settle in. The child was me. I looked up in disbelief. "Where did you get this?" Adrian answered quietly. "Your parents gave it to me before they disappeared." Every thought in my mind seemed to stop at once. I had been told my entire life that my parents died in an accident when I was very young. No one had ever suggested another possibility. Adrian spoke with the same measured certainty that had defined every conversation since we met. "They trusted me with one responsibility above all others. If the past ever found you, I was to make sure you learned the truth before anyone else could rewrite it. That is why you were expected here long before Noah sent his message, because this journey did not begin 3 days ago. It began more than 20 years ago." Ethan's fingers tightened around the silver locket, as though letting go would somehow erase everything Adrian had just revealed. The familiar faces inside the faded photographs suddenly carried questions instead of memories. I had spent my entire life believing my parents were gone because of an ordinary tragedy. Now I was standing on the veranda of a secluded estate listening to a man who claimed they had entrusted him with my future. Before I could gather my thoughts, Noah rushed onto the veranda, his normally calm expression replaced by unmistakable worry. We have a problem, he said, lowering his voice. Someone just entered the outer property using an old access road. Adrian remained remarkably composed. How many? Only one vehicle, Noah replied. But whoever they are, they already knew exactly where to stop. Adrian nodded once. Then they are not searching anymore. They are confirming. The words settled heavily between us. I looked from Noah to Adrian. Can someone please explain why complete strangers would care where I am? Noah closed his eyes briefly before speaking. Because you were never the person they expected to disappear. My heart skipped. What does that even mean? Noah looked toward Adrian as though asking permission. Adrian answered with a quiet nod. Noah inhaled slowly. Years ago your parents worked with several families, including the Blackwoods, to protect something they believed should never fall into the wrong hands. When they vanished, everyone assumed the secret disappeared with them. But recently, people began to believe they had left one final clue behind. I frowned. And they think I know where it is. No, Adrian answered. They believe you are the clue. Silence followed. The idea sounded impossible, yet every strange event since my arrival suddenly connected in ways I could no longer ignore. The messages, the map, the conversations cut short whenever I appeared, even Adrian's warning that someone had been searching for this place. None of it had been random. Before anyone could say another word, a soft chime echoed through the estate. It was not loud or alarming, yet every staff member visible through the windows immediately changed direction with quiet purpose. Noah glanced toward the hallway. The perimeter sensors. Adrian walked to the railing overlooking the front drive. In the distance, beyond rows of towering pine trees, a dark sedan remained parked outside the estate gates without attempting to enter. Its engine was off. It simply waited. They are watching, Adrian said. They want us to know they are here. I looked toward the motionless vehicle. Should we call the police? Adrian shook his head gently. There is no crime in waiting beside a public road. His answer was logical, but it did little to ease the growing tension. A cool breeze swept across the veranda, carrying the familiar scent of pine mixed with something unexpectedly familiar. I looked down at the locket again. Inside the cover, beneath the photograph, I noticed tiny engraved letters I had overlooked before. They formed a simple date followed by a location I recognized immediately. It was the address of the small house where I had grown up after my parents disappeared. Confused, I turned the locket over in my hands until I felt something shift inside its frame. A hidden compartment quietly released, revealing a folded piece of paper no larger than a postage stamp. Adrian's eyes widened for the first time since I had met him. That compartment was supposed to be empty, he said softly. I unfolded the tiny note with trembling hands. Written in careful handwriting were only 8 words. Do not trust a friend who asked you to come here. I slowly lifted my eyes from the message and looked directly at Noah. Noah did not speak immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the tiny note in my hand. Before he slowly looked back at me. For the first time since I had arrived at Blackwood Estate, the uncertainty in his expression disappeared. In its place was quiet resignation. I knew this moment would come, he said softly. I just hoped it would happen after I had the chance to explain everything. My grip tightened around the locket. Then explain it now. A long silence settled over the veranda. The dark sedan beyond the gates had not moved, and the morning mist still drifted between the towering pines as though the entire forest were waiting for Noah's answer. He finally exhaled and nodded. I did invite you here because I needed you. That part was true. But I also knew someone would notice the moment you arrived. I stared at him in disbelief. You knew I was being watched? Not just watched, Noah answered quietly. Expected. Adrian remained perfectly still beside us, allowing Noah to continue without interruption. For years, different people searched for your parents because they believed they had hidden something valuable before disappearing. They never found it. Eventually they stopped searching for an object and started searching for a person. You. My thoughts raced. You could have warned me before I came. Noah lowered his head. If I had told you everything over the phone, you never would have believed me. And if I had refused to contact you, someone else would have found you first. His words carried an uncomfortable logic that only made the situation more confusing. Then the note is wrong? I asked. Noah gave a faint, sorrowful smile. No. It is incomplete. Adrian finally spoke. That is the pattern we have been seeing for months. Every anonymous message contains part of the truth, but never enough to understand the whole story. I looked between them, struggling to decide whom to trust. Adrian stepped closer and pointed toward the folded note. Read it one more time. I did. The wording suddenly felt strangely precise. It did not say Noah had betrayed me. It only warned me not to trust the friend who asked me to come here. There is a difference, Adrian said calmly, as though reading my thoughts. Trust and intention are not always the same. Noah nodded in agreement. I brought you here knowing you would become part of this again. I did not bring you here to harm you. Those are two different choices. Before I could answer, one of the estate employees hurried onto the veranda carrying a sealed envelope. He handed it directly to Adrian before quietly stepping away. Adrian opened it and scanned the single sheet inside. His expression remained composed, but his eyes sharpened. The vehicle outside the gate has already left, he said. However, another message was delivered to the security office. He handed me the page. Instead of a signature, there was only a printed photograph taken from years earlier. It showed a smiling couple standing beside a young boy outside a modest white house. I recognized the picture immediately because the same image had been inside the silver locket. This version, however, included something the locket photograph did not. Standing several feet behind my parents was another man, partially hidden by the branches of a maple tree. The image quality was poor, but the outline of his face was unmistakable. It was Adrian, looking years younger, watching over my family long before I had ever heard the name Blackwood. I slowly lowered the photograph, realizing the greatest surprise was not that Adrian had known my parents. It was that he had quietly protected my life from the shadows long before I believed our paths had ever crossed. I could not take my eyes off the old photograph. Every answer I had uncovered since arriving at Blackwood Estate had only revealed another layer of questions, yet one truth had become impossible to deny. My life had been connected to this place long before I ever packed a bag for the trip. Adrian had not appeared by chance, and Noah had not reached out because of simple nostalgia. Somehow, every road had been leading here for years. Adrian carefully folded the photograph and returned it to the envelope. There's one final thing your parents wanted you to receive, he said. He motioned for us to follow him inside. We walked through the quiet halls until we reached the study where I had accidentally overheard fragments of their conversation the previous evening. This time Adrian unlocked a tall wooden cabinet built into the wall. Inside sat a single dark blue archive box sealed with a brass clasp. He placed it gently on the desk before looking directly at me. This has remained unopened since the day it was delivered more than 20 years ago. Noah stepped back, giving me space. It was never ours to open. My hands hesitated above the clasp. Part of me wanted every answer waiting inside, while another part feared that opening the box would permanently erase the ordinary life I thought I had known. Adrian spoke quietly. Whatever you decide, the choice belongs to you now. After taking a slow breath, I lifted the clasp. Inside rested neatly organized documents, family photographs, handwritten journals, and a sealed envelope bearing my name in my mother's handwriting. My heart pounded as I carefully opened it. The letter inside was remarkably short. She wrote that if I was reading those words, it meant the people she trusted had kept their promise. She did not describe hidden fortunes or mysterious organizations. Instead, she wrote that truth could only protect someone who was ready to carry it, and that the greatest inheritance she and my father could leave me was the freedom to choose my own future rather than allowing fear to choose it for me. At the bottom of the page she had written one final sentence. Trust actions that remain consistent longer than words. I slowly lowered the letter, realizing how perfectly it described everything I had witnessed since arriving. Noah had made difficult choices, but he had never stopped trying to protect me in the only way he believed possible. Adrian had answered very little at first, yet every action he had taken matched the responsibility my parents had entrusted to him decades earlier. Outside the study windows, sunlight finally broke through the morning clouds, filling the room with warm light. For the first time since reaching the estate, the silence no longer felt unsettling. It felt peaceful. I looked at Adrian and then at Noah before speaking with complete certainty. "I am not leaving today." Neither of them looked surprised. Adrian gave a quiet nod, almost as though he had expected that answer from the beginning. "Then we begin with the truth," he said. He reached into the archive box and removed one final folder marked only with today's date. As he placed it on the desk in front of me, I noticed another line written beneath it in my mother's handwriting, one that made me realize this story had never truly ended. It had only been waiting for the moment I was ready to turn the next page.